You're listening to Healing Voices Project, where we share stories and the latest information from people who fight addiction every day. I'm Mike Torville, your host and author of Voices from the Fallen. Thank you for listening, for following, and most of all, for sharing with people you care about. Make your voice count too. All right, we're back at Healing Voices Project. Thank you all for joining us here today. And we have a really great guest today. His name is David Greenwalt, and we're going to talk today about food, more specifically, food addiction, how food affects your moods, your mental health, and all kinds of related things outside the normal eat the right nutrition and eat 3 times a day. We're going to get a little bit deeper into that with our next guest. So with us today is a certified health coach, fitness expert, and author, David Greenwalt. David's a husband, a father, former police officer, gym owner, power lifter, and a highly competitive bodybuilder. Way back in 1997, at age 32 and weighing 235 pounds, David discovered an evidence-based approach for shedding off his own excess 50 pounds and has kept it off for more than 25 years. Now, all those years later, through his company called Leanness Lifestyle University since 1999, Dave has been helping student members from every walk of life manage food intake, lose the fat, keep the muscle, and manage nutrition through all of life's craziness. Also, too, I'll mention that David's an author of the book called The Leanness Lifestyle, Proven Strategies to Sculpt Your Body, Heal Your Mind, and Become Better Today. Who wouldn't want all that? And also, David's website is the Leanness Lifestyle University, which is lluniversity.com. Well, David Greenwalt. David, thanks for joining us today. Glad to have you.
Mike, so thanks so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm excited.
Good. I know we have a lot to talk about, and you and I talked the other day. We thought it'd be a 5-minute chat. We're on the phone for a half hour.
Right.
Later on, we said we should have just recorded that. That would have been an easy episode, right?
Absolutely.
Well, I tell you what, we talk a lot about addiction. We talk a lot about substance abuse, but there's all kinds of other addictions. There's gambling addiction, food addiction, people don't know a lot about. And honestly, when we first started talking, a confession is, I don't know about this. Will this apply? And the more you talk to them, the more the light bulb went off. I said, this is so applicable in so many ways outside what you narrowly might think. Gee, is there such a thing as food addiction? And if so, what leads to it? How is it similar or different than substance abuse addiction? And we talk about how one addiction may lead to another. Drugs may lead to alcohol. You wean yourself off of one substance into the other, and food so commonly plays a part in that. So anyway, in that conversation with you, I really started thinking, I had this epiphany. I said, oh my goodness, there's so much more to this. So I'm really excited to have you on today and talk about all this.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Yeah. So, and one of the things we said too is food addiction. Well, wait a second. You can avoid substance abuses. You can avoid drugs. You can avoid alcohol. You can avoid cigarettes. You can't avoid food. So in a weird sense, we're all addicted to food because if you don't have it, you die. Simple as that. So well, first of all, let's get into, is there such a thing as food addiction? And how is it different than other types of addiction?
It's a great question. And where the problem comes in a lot of times is what people are calling food. In my view, and in the view of those that are kind of specifically in the food addiction space, I don't call everything food just with that one word.
Okay.
In my view and world, it makes it much clearer if we say real food, processed, ultra processed food. Mm-hmm. So it's really important because in the American Dietetic Association, a lot of their members, dietitians and so forth, not all, but a lot of them have no belief, kind of like what you were saying, in food addiction. It can't happen. And one of the reasons it can't happen in their view is because food is biologically necessary for us all, and we can't be addicted to things that are biologically necessary.
Right.
That's kind of their view. And the other thing is that they will kind of bring in, or others will bring in, is it can't be, or we will never be able to define it and describe it appropriately because food is so complex. There are so many ingredients in food. There are so many chemicals in food. We would never be able to narrow down what it is in a specific food that might be the problem. Therefore, it can never be defined. Therefore, there's no such thing as food addiction. So,
oh my goodness. And by the way, just to interrupt you, to put it simply, food ain't what it used to be.
No, no, it's not.
Going back 20 years, 40, 50 years, the food generally our grandparents ate is different than what it is today, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, one of the kind of the funny meme kind of statements is, eat real food, or as your grandparents called it, food. So back then we just like our great grandparents, at the generation, we're in, they would have more aptly been able to call what they eat food. So what I say is, we need to stop calling everything just food. In our head, we need to differentiate real food, ultra processed food. Real food can have minimal processing. Things can be, obviously it has to be extracted from nature. We can't just eat it on a tree or in a branch and eat it off the ground and, try to, eat it out of a live animal. It has to be removed. And so there's processing to do that. And so I think maybe one of the best things to do up front is kind of just define real food. And so if we do that, then then much of the stuff you see on store shelves is going to be ultra processed once you hear what real food is. So real food, by my kind of, it's a loose starter definition that at least gets people thinking the right way. You know what I mean? It doesn't include every single nuanced detail of what, minimally processed is, but here it is. Real food: whole or minimally processed edible parts of plant and animal, where, if anything's been added to it, it's only things commonly found in kitchens. Okay, so let me just say that again, because that's a lot. I know that. But if someone today is going to go to the grocery store, if someone today is going to prepare a meal or go and buy things or whatever, or they're thinking of running through McDonald's real quick, or they're thinking of whatever in your head, let's try it again. Whole or minimally processed edible parts of plant and animal, after they've been extracted from nature, of course, where, if anything has been added to it, it is only things commonly found in kitchens. Now, that doesn't mean that everything commonly found in kitchens is okay for everyone, but this is the starting point. Okay. So with that as the definition, we can look at a number of just examples that might be just kind of common in people's head. And Mike, if you want, I'll let you with some examples that might be in your head, store items, whatever, where you might say, would this be real food or would it be ultra processed? Anything come to mind?
Oh, I think a couple things. I mean, you just walked into a store where I get gas at Cumberland Farms, and I just look at the shelves, and it's just a million processed foods, snacks, energy drinks. And if you look at the label's bigger than the section of ingredients is bigger than everything else on that product.
Yeah.
And you can't even understand half of the things that are in there anyway. But yeah, the thing that came to mind is all the junk people buy off the shelves at convenience stores. Yeah, and I could go through a list of them, but everybody knows what all that stuff is,
So one of the things too is that in my field, a lot of times I'll see things that'll be just as a guideline. They'll say, don't eat anything that has more than 5 ingredients. Well, I don't care if it has 50 ingredients, as long as those ingredients are whole, minimally processed, edible parts of plant and animal, things commonly found in kitchens. And then we have to look at those things commonly found in kitchens to make sure they're not ultra processed, but anyway, that's the starting point. So I don't care if it has 50 ingredients. So I just throw that out. Another thing that'll be given as kind of general guideline advice on real food versus ultra processed is they'll say, don't eat it if you can't pronounce the ingredient. And I always bring up quinoa is kind of a funky word. Quinoa is a funky word. A lot of people can't pronounce quinoa when they first see it, but that has nothing to do with whether it's real food and whether it's appropriate or not in a healthy way. So I don't care if you can pronounce it. I don't care if it has more than 5 ingredients. And I don't label packaged foods or whatever as bad or good, healthy or unhealthy. I look at it really, because when we do that, we can feel a lot of guilt, when we eat something. But this is just kind of the primer, so we can get into food addiction itself. This lays the groundwork. But I look at it from two points. One, is it real food?
Mm-hmm.
And two, does it work for you?
Mm.
So an example. You want me to give an example, or you had a thought?
No, go ahead and give an example. I have a question, but go ahead.
Okay. So is it real food? Okay. Just kind of gave the loose definition.
Yeah.
Just so that it can kind of be in people's minds. And second is, does it work for you? So an example might be nuts or nut butter. Okay. So let's say the ingredients on a jar of peanuts is peanuts and salt. All right. Let me ask, by my definition of real food, would that classify as real food? Ingredients, peanuts, salt.
Yeah.
All right. Absolutely. You look at it. Hey, old Dave says real food. Got it. Good to go. And, so then we ask, does it work for you? Well, someone says, for an example, well, I normally eat the entire jar once I open it. Well, if your goal is weight management, weight loss, if you're not progressing towards your goal, if it's interfering, impeding, because of the caloric content, because you down the whole jar, because it's peanuts, it's something that's more of a trigger for you, it's something that you have a harder time controlling, then we say that doesn't work for you. Another way that it might not work for you is you could be allergic to it. Mm-hmm. You can say, hey, it's real, right? Peanuts especially. You can say, hey, it's real food, but you're allergic to it, so it doesn't work for you. So it's not bad or good, healthy, unhealthy. Is it real food, and does it work for you? So if it doesn't work for you in the sense that, let's say it's peanut butter, or just peanuts. But if it's peanut butter and your serving is, again, half the jar, mm-hmm. that's a serving, and the jar lasts a day in the mm-hmm. home, mm-hmm. then we would say, if your goal is weight management and you're not progressing toward your goal, we would say that doesn't work for you. So we might have to eliminate that. So that's kind of the starter. That's real food. And so here's the thing. Are you addicted to real food? No. It's ultra processed. In every instance, if someone is addicted, they're addicted to ultra processed food. They might even think, because they've got a minimal amount of ultra processed food in their plan, that it's something real food oriented. But I guarantee you, if they have triggered eating, binge eating, addictive tendencies, compulsive overeating, there is ultra processed food in the plan that's causing the problem. That's changing the brain chemistry, that's setting us up for the overconsumption that isn't serving us for whatever goals we have.
And I there's a lot there, because first of all, I think with the addiction and like certain chemicals in drugs or alcohol, you have a craving that you want to keep having that food. But in addition to that, what you talked about, it changes the chemistry of your brain. Certain foods, and a lot of people don't know about it because it may be subtle, or they're just not paying attention. But certain foods, certain chemicals can change your mental state, your mood, can trigger anxiety, depression, all kinds of things that are as a result of eating, the wrong foods, processed foods. And the effect is tremendous, especially when people have other underlying issues. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And I would say we just need to continually distinguish that with regard to the problems that occur mentally, cognitively, emotionally, psychologically, that come from ultra processed foods. It is ultra processed foods that's driving that. And all of the more than 3,000 industrial additives that are used in the processing of foods, as everything from colorants to preservatives to enhancers in taste, texture, mouthfeel, flavoring, preservatives, you name it. All of those, most of which have not been thoroughly reviewed and investigated in research or by the FDA, although people think that the FDA is really with the Food and Drug Administration as the oversight agency over the foods that we consume, we think that they've really taken a deep dive look at what's in the things. And if it made it to the shelf, we must be okay, it must be safe. But in fact, that's absolutely not the case. They are burdened, they are overworked, understaffed, they don't have the ability to review everything. And it's not a requirement for big food to have it cleared through the FDA before they put something in.
Wow. When we're talking about all of this, I can't help thinking, and again, we talk about it a lot on the show, substance abuse, alcohol, all varying types of drugs that people use sometimes to escape or because there's anxiety, there's trauma, there's all kinds of underlying issues. How different is it that someone might resort to food rather than those types of substances? And do you see real similarities or differences in the two types of addiction?
A lot of similarities, in that we still see craving. We still see a lot of time spent using. I'm throwing that in quotes because that's what it is. I don't look at the ultra processed stuff on shelves, but I'll say there's tolerance, there's withdrawal, there's use despite negative consequences. There's all of the things very similarly to other substances of abuse that occurs with ultra processed food. But a lot of people are very unaware that that's the case, because the message that's out there, so much so, and still, which is a huge factor in what's going on, is one of moderation in all things. Well, if you think about all the other things that you mentioned, Mike, whatever the drug may be, alcohol, nicotine, cocaine, whatever it may be, you wouldn't tell someone who is an alcoholic, we'll just have one and just stop at one, just have a beer. It'd be ridiculous. If someone is addicted to something, to say to them, well, I don't know, just, smoke a little bit of crack. What? That makes no
moderate.
sense.
Yeah. Just moderate. That's all.
I'll crack in moderation.
Right.
It's ridiculous. And the confusion, a huge part of the confusion, nothing is one thing, but a huge part of the confusion is in everything being defined as food. To me, it's real food and basically ultra processed. It could be just minimally processed. It really could. Oatmeal or oats, for example, are processed because they are removed, dried, ground, and then put in. There's nothing else added to it. They are minimally processed, right? They're not just whole. We're not just taking the oat, we're not taking the grain out of the ground and sticking it in a can. Right. It's been processed, but there's been nothing added to it. And so we would still consider that real food, minimally processed.
Yeah.
So it's that confusion over, so many people are confused because of that moderation message, which has been out there for 50 years, which is one of the reasons we're 43% obese today, rather than 15% obese in 1970. This proliferation of ultra processed food consumption displacing real food. I'll say that again. The proliferation of ultra processed food consumption displacing real food consumption is the single greatest factor in why we as a country here in the United States are 2.5 times as obese today as we were in 1970. And all the factors that go into that, including the addictive nature itself of ultra processed foods, is a contributing factor to that excessive consumption of the ultra processed food.
Oh, that's crazy. Almost 3 times the amount. And also too, when you look at pictures from the 60s and 70s, everybody's skinny. Yeah. When you look at the pictures, you don't have to look at pictures. You just go anywhere now and right. You just see, there's a big difference there. And what we also hear a lot too, and see a lot, is if somebody has an addiction to a substance, if it's alcohol and they go away from that, it may turn to another substance, or if it's a substance, a drug, and then they crack that, or that's a wrong choice of word, but they get off that, and they turn to something else. Right. And food often becomes that target to replace an addiction.
Food does.
Oh, okay. You're right. I said the word food, and it's
You know what
ultra
I mean?
processed food.
It does take a bit for it to switch.
Yes.
But if in
Yes.
your head, and by the way, let me make it clear too, I'm
Yeah.
not saying that every single person listening, I'm not saying that every single person, every single adult child in the United States, whoever, has to go 100% all in on real food, 100%. I don't go 100%. I'm at 90%. The goal is to eat as much as a percentage of what you totally eat as real food as possible, okay?
Mm-hmm.
While making sure that regardless of that percentage, which you want it to be as high as possible, you're not consuming a trigger food, trigger ultra processed food, a trigger food for you. So again, it's kind of that's a part of that. Is it real food? Does it work for you? And so, avoiding triggers is paramount to the ultimate, success and overcoming of this, just like it would be in other substances of abuse.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You may be okay, bear with me, you might be okay with a bowl of Raisin Bran
mm-hmm.
or whatever that may be considered ultra processed, and you may not be okay with a donut.
Yeah.
Those are two ultra processed foods, one more than another, of course, but nonetheless, each person is individual in the thing or things that could be problematic for them. And so it's going to be important to kind of figure out, it may not be eliminate all processed foods, every single one of them 100% for the rest of your life. It might be this one and these and this class and this one, it may be processed grain type products with added sugar. Mm-hmm. It might be a whole class of products, or it might be just some of those products. Here's the thing. I'd ask anyone listening, when you overconsume, when you eat off plan, when you've made a promise to yourself that you are going to do well, eat better, ABC, 1, 2, 3, New Year's resolution stuff, whatever it may be, when you've made that promise to yourself, what did you eat when you slipped? What did you eat when you went off plan? What did you eat when you binged? Whatever it may be for you. And what I'll say is, for most people, it's the same ultra processed food or foods, not that many, in the same way, at the same time, in the same place. So for a lot of people, and it can morph into various things. For a lot of people, it will be 5, 6, 7, 8 things. And it doesn't mean they have to totally eliminate those. I don't know. But we would want to look at those things and start evaluating whether, just like substance abuse is, the thing is, I am generally for moderation in all things as far as living life, right? But sometimes 0 is better than 1. Mm-hmm. In the addiction space, especially, we all know that's true. 0 for some things is a must, because 1 is too many, and mm-hmm. 1,000. In food addiction, it's the saying is 1 bite is too many, and 1,000 will never be enough.
Right.
And so, sometimes 0 is better than 1. So I don't know with your ultra processed food things that are your triggers, if you have them, what they are, but you probably know what they are.
Yeah. Well, I think at times we've all, through anxiety or a tough day, we've binged and ate more than we should have. That's just kind of common. But if there's a pattern to it, and the other thing, and I think anybody listening, like myself, I'm starting to think now, okay, when did I recognize that and you start to find some common things, and you say, well, there's a pattern here that once you recognize. But I'm thinking about something else here too, as we're talking about, if it's alcohol, if it's different substances, say, okay, there's places to call, to seek out for help. If you suspect or think you have a problem with a food addiction and you just can't stop, and you're, besides the caloric intake and all this stuff, but your moods, the anxiety, all those effects it's having, and yet they can't stop. One, I'm wondering about the stigma attached to that and how people feel about actually talking about it. And number two, what do they do? Because it doesn't seem to be the outlets or recognizable places to go to say, hey, I have a problem. Who do I call? Because I think I have a food addiction. I just can't stop binging eating. I have no idea where someone would turn to.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So there are resources. Okay. There are people who, I spent every single day, not every client I have, but every single day I'm working with clients who are processed food addicts every single day. So there are, so I'm going to raise my hand first, of course, but there are authors that are food addiction authors and experts that have their own programs. There are also organizations like Food Addicts in Recovery Anonymous. Food Addicts in Recovery Anonymous. There's Food Addicts Anonymous. There's Overeaters Anonymous. Those, I think, are maybe the big three as far as organizations. And some of these organizations have groups in your area. You don't know about them, but if you go to their site, you might be able to find a group in your area. Some of them are probably doing virtual groups as well. I've had clients of mine do that in addition to what they're working with me. I've had them try it, and it's like anything. And anyone listening who's done groups, there's going to be some that found a great group and they can rave, and it was very positive, and thank goodness, thank God that they had the group. And then there's a number of other people who say it was the wrong direction, the wrong group, negativity. It was on and on and on, and it wasn't good. It's your mileage may vary type of scenario. Also, happen. There are in-person kind of treatment centers for food addicts, and that can be Googled and found as well. So there are in-person treatment centers. There are groups. There are, I'm raising my hand because we have an intimate awareness of what's going on, and we work with processed food addicts, and we have our kind of not 10-step, but 10 principles, that we use to kind of help them really work through it, and make sure that they are avoiding their triggers and making sure they're taking care of themselves in the right way. So it's not our 12-step. It's more 10 principles and we call it trigger-free living for the triggered eater.
Okay.
And that's because you were talking about, how do people feel if they've identified themselves and they kind of feel labeled as a food addict?
Yeah.
They don't feel good. I mean, by and large, if I'm being honest, when I poll my group and I say, how does it feel if I say to you, you're a food addict? They go, ugh, I feel like I'm weak, or I'm less than, or it's yucky. It's
embarrassing.
It's embarrassing. Yeah. Why am I this way and no one else is? Well, trust me, you are not alone. Again, let me say 43% obese in the United States. We're supposed to be 50% obese by 2030, by the way. So you are not alone, but it's very important that we make sure that it's processed food addiction, not all food addiction. You're not addicted to chicken breast and broccoli.
I don't hear many people saying they're addicted to carrots, for
carrots,
example.
Chicken breast, lean cuts of meat and vegetables. You're not addicted to. That's not what you're using, to change your state, to reduce anxiety, to escape, to get relief in the moment, for all the things that it's being used for. You are not using real food.
Right. Now, here's another side to this. When someone, and I keep going back to it because it keeps tying into it, is when someone has had or is in recovery from other substance abuses, whether it's alcohol or drugs, how important, and I think I know what you're going to say here, but how important is it to avoid those processed foods? And the follow-up is, those processed foods could make it more difficult to cope because it may trigger anxiety, depression, and all those triggering aspects that cause people to go back to their addiction. So I guess the question is, your nutrition, your diet, how effective is that in helping people through recovery from other substances?
Well, like you said, it's very important. Like you said, you knew I was going to say that. But you know, the thing is that you're absolutely right. It's very common. I see it so often. A lot of people that I work with that are processed food addicts came from a different addiction that they overcame.
Mm-hmm.
So they are in recovery from alcoholism. They are in recovery from nicotine. They're in recovery from something else. And they've been doing well 5, 10, 15, whatever it may be, years that they've been sober, in recovery, and they've done well. And it transferred, which is super common. Mm-hmm. It transferred to processed food addiction. And so now here we are, and they've been confused until I shared the message that I'm sharing with you and your listeners. They've been very confused because they've been taught moderation in all things. I can't be addicted to food. Mm-hmm. So here they are. It's transferred. They didn't know it transferred. They had an inkling that they're like, gosh, I'm eating more junk than I used to when I blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
When I was addicted to whatever. But okay, it's all things in moderation. Why can't I should just be able to stop this? I can't be addicted to food. All things in moderation. And they need the clarity that I'm sharing with you and your listeners, where you go, hey, you're fine. You're not broken. You're not defective. You're good. It's not your fault at all. It's not a moral failing. That's very important. And it's not just to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and do this, as though we would tell someone addicted to alcohol that just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and say no, just say no.
Right.
That doesn't work. So when we transfer it to, hey, let's see what are your triggers. Okay. Because it isn't going to be 1,000 foods, ultra processed foods. It's going to be 5, 6, 8, 10 different ones, because it's, again, almost always the same ones at the same place in the same way at the same time, for the same reasons. It's like every time I have a tense argument with my spouse, I want to eat. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Right. So let's just say, kind of a common when you go, oh gosh, that was a really tense argument with my spouse. I feel like the world's caving in on me. I don't know if the marriage is going to last, whatever, that you go catastrophic.
Yeah.
And so it's one of the things we do with our clients as well, is try to help them learn how to bring it down, bring all of the temperature down and the emotional response down, so that we at least aren't going catastrophic. Because when we go catastrophic, we just kind of throw caution to the wind. We're just kind of like, hell, my life is over. I have no hope because I had this argument with my spouse. So obviously it's all over. It's not, but that's can be how it feels, Right. And when we go catastrophic, we go out, the what the hell effect comes in. And that's actually a psychological phrase that was put out 10, 15 years ago by a couple of psychologists. And it's called the what the hell effect. And that's where we go. Everybody's familiar with it. We go, what the hell? Since my marriage is over anyway, I may as well eat a dozen donuts.
Right. I'm guilty. Yeah.
Right. Me too. Oh, heck yeah. So because I'm more aware of it, I go, wait a minute. I'm running into this, the what the hell effect here. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if I might have missed the actual.
No, I think you got as far as, and I guess I'm thinking, because there's a lot of people who I've spoken with who have talked about how changing their diet helped them through their recovery. Prior to that, when they were, call it addicted to processed foods, it was more difficult. But getting rid of the processed foods changed their mental state, lowered their anxiety, relieved their depression, and it made them much more able to cope through that process.
That is I'm just going to echo that very simply and just say, absolutely true. Each person is different. However, by and large, across the board, removal of, I should say, first of all, reducing ultra processed food to 10% of intake. Okay. Instead of, like, right now in the United States, my research says that 60 to 70% of what we Americans are consuming, research says 60 to 70% of what we're consuming is ultra processed food. I say that's too low. I don't believe that for a second. I don't believe for a second that we Americans are eating 30 to 40% real food. Absolutely not. No way in heck are we 30 to 40% real food. The morning is bagel and a donut and a what, whatever. And then lunches swing through, Burger King or whatever, Chick-fil-A or whatever it is. And then supper is something that, on and on and on and on and on. I think we're at 80-90% ultra processed food. So first of all, bring that down as much as you can, the ultra processed. Try to get it to no more than about 10%. And that's the starting point.
And I think that's having a realistic, optimistic, but realistic goal, because if your goal is 0 and you're going to completely abstain, that can in itself create anxiety.
Yes.
So give yourself a little break, right?
Right. Exactly.
So, yeah.
And it isn't everything. Yeah. And the other thing I want to say to people is, you might feel, and I'm only saying this because this is how clients have expressed it to me, I don't know why I'm so weak. I don't know why I'm so bad at this. Here's the thing. You're not bad at this. You've just been given the wrong message and the wrong instructions and the wrong idea about what's really going on. And once you know what you're really facing, especially if you're someone who has overcome another substance, abuse addiction.
Yes.
You understand, okay, so hang on. I know what I did before with that. I thought food was food. If I believe Dave and other people, I didn't invent this concept of real food versus ultra processed food is not a Dave invention. I'm borrowing from researchers and people that are intellects and people that just lived their lives and devoted their lives for decades to understanding what's going on here.
And you yourself have been practicing this for 25 years.
Yes, exactly. And I can't tell you how my practice changed in the late 90s when I first learned about food addiction. Mm-hmm. When I learned about food addiction in the late 90s, that's when I first learned about it. My head just exploded. I thought, this explains so much about why my smart, capable, successful, strong-willed, everything else in their life going well type of person is still struggling to eat less and exercise more. Mm-hmm. Calories in, calories out. Right. Just eat less and exercise more.
Yeah,
calories
so
in,
hard.
Calories out. Yeah. It's not that hard. Come on. It's a 5-word diet. Eat less and exercise more. And you go, why aren't you doing it? This explains a great deal of why, because it's so similar to telling, again, the alcoholic to just drink less, and abstain more, or, whatever. But I mean, whatever the 5-word thing would be for that, for people that have depression, just feel bad less. Come on.
How hard can that be?
Right.
Come on.
And so that's what we've been telling people in the United States for 50, 60, 70 years.
Right.
And that message, here's the thing. The math is right. I can tell you, Mike, if I knew your height and weight and age, let's say body composition, so I know your muscle and fat ratio. If I know that data, and even if I don't have all of that, if I have most of that data, I can tell you probably within a couple hundred calories what you're going to need to maintain and what you're going to need to lose at a good rate. Mm-hmm. The math we can figure out really quick. It's not universal, but it's close enough for most people where we're going to get it pretty close. I can estimate really closely what you're going to need. The thing is if you're addicted to processed foods, the number doesn't matter because it just gets tossed out the window no matter what plan we give you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fixing it up here because you've got to get your mindset right to be able to do this. And understand it too and learn about it. But I think a lot of people wouldn't, again, maybe there's the stigma to attach to it. Maybe there's a lack of understanding,
right?
A lack of knowledge of where to go to find out information, which you've mentioned. And would you mind mentioning those Overeaters Anonymous and a few other groups, just so we can reemphasize that point, where people can go?
Let's see. It's recovery, food addicts in recovery Anonymous, Food Addicts Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous are kind of the big 3 organizations. And then again, like I said, there's in person as well. And you had asked a second ago, you said, how do people feel if they're labeled, a food addict? Yeah. For my clients, I talk about food addiction, but I come at it from this, and it softens it a bit. And this is how I really see it. I have a big umbrella, a macro view, and this big umbrella is triggered eater. Okay, so that's kind of how I think of it. Are you a triggered eater? And within that umbrella, there's a continuum that kind of goes from user to abuser to addict. So you could be a triggered eater and be on the lower end. Because some of your listeners may say, doesn't apply to me because I know how I was when I was alcoholic. I'm not under a bridge, eating McDonald's,
Right.
I'm not, or whatever, let's go make it just a visual where it's like, whatever the worst case scenario may be, I didn't sell my car so that I could fund this, process. No. So it doesn't have to be that. If you're a triggered eater, you could be just a user, which is on the lower end.
Yeah.
Here's my differentiator and to me, what matters. Whether you're a user, abuser, addict under the triggered eater umbrella, is it interfering with your life? Is it interfering with your goals? Have you said 100 times, I'm going to lose these 20 pounds. I'm going to lose these 40 pounds. I want to feel better. I'm going to get my weight. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And do we have 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 false starts? If we do, then it doesn't matter if you're user, abuser, or addict. The treatment, so to speak, begins the same way. For every single one of those, the treatment begins the same way. We look at what are your trigger foods, situations, environment, time of day, people, all the triggers, but specifically the things you can control, not the things out of your control, the things you can control. Let's identify what they are, and let's see if reduction can be enough. Instead of having 6 donuts at breakfast, just exaggerating, but whatever. For some people, that's not exaggerating at all. That's half. Okay, but whatever. And again, no judgment there. It is what it is. I'm truly Switzerland when it comes to judging, looking at some neutral. I'm as neutral as I just look and I say, hey, I just want to know what it is.
Right.
So whether it's 6 or 12, so let's say it's 6, maybe it can be reduced to 2. But maybe that, again, maybe the donut has to go to 0. But there's something else, obviously, that may be similar in category, but may not be a trigger for you, where you don't eat 1,200 calories of donuts for breakfast or 1,500.
Right.
And here's the thing too, regardless of just the calories, regardless of the nutrients, vitamins, minerals, protein, carbs, fats, and all that, regardless of that, we still need to be moving toward just eating real food just for health and longevity and health.
Of course, back from what you said in the very beginning. Absolutely. Yeah. And the difference in recognizing that. Now, a lot of this information, do you have a lot of this information on your website?
Yeah. So on the website, here's the thing. A lot of what I'm sharing is what we share as a part of our educational program on campus when someone becomes a member. So on our website, it's more just, it's just an about us kind of page. It's like, here's who we are. Here's what we do for our clients, and all this kind of stuff. What I'm sharing here is more insider, member-based information.
Yeah.
The starter information, as far as like, hopefully speaking to the person who needs help, is what our webpage is about.
And that is lluniversity.com.
lluniversity.com. Yep.
Dave Greenwald. And if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, would going through the website be the best way to do it?
It would be.
Okay. All right. So lluniversity.com. And also, I'll mention again, Dave's book called The Leanness Lifestyle, Proven Strategies to Sculpt Your Body, Heal Your Mind, and Become Better Today. Well, we could talk. I know we said earlier, we could talk. We might have to have you back again, because I know we could talk a long time. But all this has been very helpful and revealing. And I think hopefully our listeners find out that they learn something new and find different resources for things that they might not have thought about and ask more questions about it. So Dave, thanks really for joining us, spending the time with us. And again, to find out more about Dave's program or Dave himself, or get in touch with him at the Leanness Lifestyle University, lluniversity.com. Thanks everybody for joining us today. And thank you again, David. We will talk soon.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
All right. Thanks.